Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. The autumn wind swept fiercely over Maine's Crystal Lake, disrupting the mirror-like calm with restless ripples. Victor Hale's truck rumbled down the winding gravel path to his family's secluded lakeside estate, headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. His grip on the steering wheel tightened, the tension in his knuckles mirroring the unease in his chest. His father's cryptic call about the vintage Chris Craft boat had been abrupt, lacking his usual steady demeanor. Edward Hale had cherished that boat for over 30 years, treating its upkeep as a sacred ritual. "Dad, what's wrong with the boat?" Victor had asked over the phone. Edward's voice had wavered. Just come quickly, son. Please." That hesitation, that tremor in his father's usually steady voice, it wasn't right. Victor had learned to trust his instincts during his years in special operations, and right now, every nerve-ending screamed that something was terribly wrong. As he rounded the final bend in the driveway, the first red flag appeared. The property's security cameras, which he'd personally installed last spring, hung motionless. Their recording lights, which should have been blinking steady red, were dark. Victor slowed the truck, scanning the property with practiced precision. His heart nearly stopped when he spotted his wife Sabrina's black Mercedes parked behind his parents' car. She told him she would be in Boston all week for a real estate conference. Victor had even helped her pack, listening to her enthusiastic chatter about networking opportunities and potential high-end property listings. "Just think, darling," she'd said, kissing his cheek. "This could be our big break into luxury real estate." Now her presence here, on a Wednesday afternoon when she should have been 2 states away, sent ice through his veins. Victor parked his truck out of sight, behind the old groundskeeper's shed. As he approached the house, his military training took over. Each step deliberate, his breathing controlled. The front door stood ajar, afternoon sunlight spilling across scattered papers in the entryway. Family photos lay face down on the hardwood floor, their frames cracked. Victor's hand instinctively reached for a weapon that wasn't there, his combat reflexes surging to the surface. From the direction of the boathouse came muffled voices. Victor moved silently across the lawn, years of tactical training guiding his movements. As he drew closer, his wife's voice carried clearly through the autumn air, cold, calculating, and utterly foreign to the woman he thought he'd married. "You two better clear your son's inheritance soon so I can divorce him and take a bigger cut." Sabrina's words dripped with contempt. "After that, I'll retire rich, thanks to him. Don't you dare tell anything to your son, or my lover will make sure you won't be around much longer." Victor positioned himself near the boathouse window, his back pressed against the weathered wood. Through the slats, he could see his mother Margaret's tear-streaked face, her usually immaculate silver hair disheveled. Edward sat beside her, cradling his right wrist, which was beginning to show signs of bruising. The sight of his father, a proud man who'd built their construction company from nothing, looking defeated sent rage coursing through Victor's body. Standing beside Sabrina was a hulking figure Victor didn't recognize, a muscular man with crude prison tattoos snaking up his neck. Later, Victor would learn this was Derek Shaw. But in that moment, all he saw was a threat to his family. The man's stance and the slight bulge under his jacket suggested he was armed. What caught Victor's attention next made his blood boil. Around Sabrina's neck gleamed his mother's sapphire necklace, a Peterson family heirloom passed down through 4 generations. Margaret had worn that necklace at Victor's wedding, promising to give it to his future daughter one day. "The money's not enough?" Sabrina was saying, her manicured fingers toying with the stolen necklace. "Maybe I should take this too. It's probably worth more than that pathetic boat your husband wastes so much time on." "That necklace belongs to my daughter." Margaret's voice shook with anger despite her fear. Derek stepped forward, his shadow falling across Margaret. "You don't have a daughter, old lady. Just a son who married the wrong woman." His laugh was ugly, matching the cruel twist of his mouth. Edward struggled to his feet. "You won't get away with this. Victor will." "Victor will what?" Sabrina cut him off with a sneer. "Cry about it? Please. Your son's so blindly in love with me. He wouldn't believe you if you told him the sky was blue. She leaned closer to Edward, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Now, where are the rest of the documents? Victor's hand slipped into his pocket, activating his phone's recording feature. With his other hand, he sent a prearranged SOS signal to his old military teammate, James Rollins, now a detective with the state police. Years of friendship had taught them to trust such signals without question. Through the window, Victor could see the boathouse table clearly now. Half-empty coffee cups sat scattered across its surface, a faint white residue visible around their rims. The wall safe, hidden behind a vintage boating poster, gaped open, decades of family documents spread across the floor like fallen leaves. The transfer papers need both our signatures, Edward was saying, his voice stronger now. And I won't sign anything under duress. Derek's response was immediate and violent. He grabbed Margaret's arm roughly, yanking her to her feet. Your choice, old man. Sign the papers or your wife takes a swim in the lake. That was the moment Victor's restraint snapped. No one threatened his family. No one. He burst through the boathouse door, his presence announcing itself like a thunderclap in the enclosed space. Let her go. Now, the look of shock on Sabrina's face would have been almost comical under different circumstances. Derek reacted instantly, shoving Margaret aside and reaching for his concealed weapon. But Victor was already moving, his military training taking over. The fight was swift and brutal. Derek had prison yard tactics and raw strength, but Victor had years of special operations training. As Derek drew his weapon, Victor grabbed a hammer from his father's toolbox, using it to disarm the larger man. The gun went flying, skittering across the floor and under a workbench. Derek charged like a bull, but Victor sidestepped, using the man's momentum against him. The impact sent Derek crashing into the boat repair equipment, tools clattering around him like metallic rainfall. Victor, baby, this isn't what it looks like. Sabrina's composed facade cracked, fear creeping into her voice. Your parents, they're confused. They've been. Shut up. Victor's voice was ice. Just shut up. Sabrina's fear transformed into something darker. You have no idea who you're dealing with, she snarled. The Castellano family will. The sound of police sirens cut through the air, growing closer by the second. Victor kept his eyes on Derek, who was struggling to his feet, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. Your parents deserve this, Sabrina spat. All their wealth wasted on that stupid boat and their precious family name. We just helped ourselves to what should have been yours anyway. The only thing I deserve, Victor replied calmly, is watching you both go to prison. The wail of police sirens grew louder, but Derek wasn't finished. With surprising speed, he produced something from his jacket. A military-grade smoke grenade. The action revealed his own service background, a detail that would later prove crucial to the investigation. Now Derek shouted, pulling the pin. Thick smoke filled the boathouse within seconds. Victor heard his mother cough, his father calling out in confusion. Through the chaos, he caught a glimpse of Sabrina and Derek disappearing through a hidden route behind the boathouse, one that led directly into the dense Maine woods. Dad, get Mom out, Victor commanded, trying to follow the escapees. But the smoke was too thick, and his priority had to be his family's safety. By the time the smoke cleared, Detective Carla Voss was leading a team of officers onto the property. Victor found his parents on the lawn, where emergency medical technicians were examining Edward's injured wrist. They had this planned, Victor told Detective Ruiz, his arm around his shaking mother. The escape route, the smoke grenade. This was an amateur hour, Ruiz nodded, taking notes. We'll find them, Mr. Peterson. But right now, I need you to tell me everything you know about your wife. As Victor began to speak, more details emerged. Sabrina's true identity, Sofia Martinez, a woman wanted in 3 states for elder fraud and marriage scams. Derek's real name was Marcus Green, a dishonorably discharged Marine with documented connections to organized crime. The family's lawyer, Stephen Fry, arrived with suspicious speed, his BMW racing up the gravel drive before Victor had even called him. Unknown to the Petersons, he'd been working with Sabrina for months, helping orchestrate their financial destruction. As police searched the property, evidence of a sophisticated criminal enterprise emerged. Forged documents lay hidden in the boat's storage compartments. Offshore account details were discovered tucked inside old maintenance locks. Most disturbing were the traces of substance found in the coffee cups, proof that Edward and Margaret had been systematically gave them substance to make them more compliant. Your father's signature on these documents, Detective Ruiz said, holding up a stack of papers and evidence bags. They're good forgeries, but they're forgeries nonetheless. They've been working on this for months. Victor stood in the boathouse doorway, watching the sun set over Crystal Lake. The vintage Chris Craft boat bobbed gently at its mooring, a silent witness to the day's events. His mother's sapphire necklace was gone, along with decades of family history and trust. But Victor Hale was far from defeated. "Detective," he said, turning to Ruiz, "I want to be involved in every step of this investigation." "That's not standard procedure," she began. "Neither is what happened here today." Victor's voice was firm. "They didn't just try to steal our money. They tried to destroy my family. This isn't over." As crime scene technicians combed the property and his parents gave their statements, Victor made a silent vow. Sabrina, or Sophia, or whatever her real name was, had chosen the wrong family to target. She thought she knew him, thought she had him figured out. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. The autumn wind continued to blow across Crystal Lake, carrying with it the promise of coming winter. But for Victor Hale, it carried something else. The certainty that this was only the beginning. The mahogany-paneled study in the Peterson estate underwent a dramatic transformation in the week following the lake house incident. Victor methodically stripped the walls of their family photos, replacing generations of smiling faces with surveillance feeds and criminal network charts. The vintage sailing maps that Edward had collected now served as backdrops for financial flow diagrams and suspected criminal connections. "Sir, FBI is here," announced Officer Chun, one of the local police officers assigned to guard the property. Victor looked up from the stack of financial records he'd been reviewing. Special Agent Sullivan strode into the study, her dark suit and precise movements marking her as federal law enforcement before she even showed her credentials. Behind her came a team of specialists carrying cases of equipment. "Mr. Peterson," Sullivan said, extending her hand. "Your case just landed on my desk. This goes far beyond a simple inheritance dispute." Victor gestured to the evidence boards he'd assembled. "I've been piecing things together." "My wife, Sophia Martinez," Sullivan interrupted, spreading photographs across Edward's antique desk, "though that's just one of her aliases." "Your wife isn't just a con artist, Mr. Peterson. She's the mastermind behind the Castellano family's elder fraud division." Victor leaned forward, studying the photos. They showed Sabrina, no Sophia, at various high-end art galleries across New England. In each image, she wore a different designer outfit, but her predatory smile remained constant. "Those art galleries she frequented?" Sullivan continued. "Money laundering fronts? The real estate conferences? Planning sessions for their next targets? We've been building a case against the Castellanos for years, but they're careful. Your wife's mistake was getting greedy with your family." A tall man in wire-rimmed glasses stepped forward, carrying a laptop. "Howard Spence, Forensic Accounting." He introduced himself. "We've been tracking financial patterns across the eastern seaboard. Each transaction, each art sale leads back to the same network." Spence pulled up complex financial diagrams on his screen. "See these transfers? High-end art pieces moving between galleries in Boston, New York, and Miami. Perfect for laundering money. The Castellanos were doing small-time elder fraud before your wife showed them how to steal entire family legacies." Victor studied the patterns, his military training helping him spot the tactical elements in their financial strategy. "They move the money like they're moving troops," he observed, "creating diversions, false trails." "Exactly," Sullivan nodded approvingly. "Your background might be crucial in understanding their operation." At that moment, Detective Ruiz entered with fresh coffee for the team. "Your parents are settled at the mountain cabin," she reported to Victor. "Full security detail in place." Victor nodded, grateful for the update. His parents were recovering at a secure location, their testimony proving invaluable. Each day revealed more about the methodical nature of Sabrina's operation. She'd prepare their coffee every morning, playing the dutiful daughter-in-law while lacing their drinks with a carefully measured cocktail of a legal substance. Direct's presence wasn't just for muscle, Sullivan explained, pulling up his military record. Marcus Green, discharged for conduct unbecoming. He used psychological warfare techniques. Subtle threats implied violence. More effective than outright force for maintaining control. Victor remembered the bruise on his father's wrist, his mother's tear-streaked face. His jaw tightened. What's our next move? We build an airtight case, Sullivan declared. The Castellanos have connections in law enforcement, judiciary, even banking. We need overwhelming evidence. As if on cue, Howard Spence's laptop pinged. Another transfer just went through. They're moving art pieces again. A Monet this time, valued at $2.3 million. Victor walked to the window, looking out at Crystal Lake. The vintage Chris Craft boat bobbed gently at its mooring. A reminder of everything his family had nearly lost. They think they've won, he said quietly. Let's prove them wrong. The arrival of Stephen Fry at FBI headquarters marked a turning point in the investigation. The family lawyers sat in an interrogation room. His expensive suit wrinkled, his usual confidence shattered. Faced with mounting evidence of his crimes, he began to crack. Start from the beginning, Agent Sullivan commanded, while Victor watched through the one-way glass. How did you get involved? Fry's hands trembled as he reached for the water glass before him. The Castellanos approached me 2 years ago. Small favors at first. Expediting some property transfers, backdating a few documents. The money was, he swallowed hard. The money was too good to resist. And Sofia Martinez? Sullivan pressed. When did she enter the picture? She found me, Fry admitted. Knew about my work with the Castellanos. Said she had bigger plans. He leaned forward, voice dropping. The Castellanos owned 6 retirement homes across 3 states. Sabrina, Sofia. She'd identify wealthy targets, then create circumstances forcing them to move in. Once isolated, the families never stood a chance. Victor felt a hand on his shoulder. Travis Minor, his former team leader and now an FBI consultant, stood beside him. You okay? I trusted him, Victor said quietly. He handled my parents' estate planning for 20 years. Travis nodded grimly. That's how they operate. They don't just steal money. They steal trust. Inside the interrogation room, Fry continued his confession. Judge Jeffrey Matthews was key. He approved all the fraudulent property transfers through his court. The bank managers, they're all in on it too. They facilitate the movement of stolen funds. Take their cut. Sullivan spread photos across the table, surveillance shots of Direct at various locations. Tell us about Green's role. He's their enforcer, Fry explained. Ex-military like you suspected. That smoke grenade from the lake house? Military grade. Stolen from Camp Lejeune. They've got connections to arms trafficking too. Victor's military training proved crucial in analyzing these tactical elements. Working with Travis, he began mapping Direct's patterns. The escape route at the lake house, Victor pointed out. The smoke grenade deployment. These aren't random actions. No, Travis agreed. This is military protocol, adapted for criminal use. Look at the timing of their movements, the coordination. They've got training. Sullivan joined them in the observation room, her expression grave. We just uncovered something disturbing. The Castellanos have hired a contract killer, Ronald Chavez. His target? She met Victor's eyes. You. Victor absorbed this information without flinching. Why haven't they moved yet? Because of your behavior, Sullivan explained. They're waiting for you to self-destruct. Our surveillance shows they're monitoring you, expecting the betrayed husband routine. Is buying us time. Then let's give them what they expect, Victor said, a plan forming in his mind. As Winter's grip tightened around Crystal Lake, Victor Hale began his carefully orchestrated downward spiral. He made sure he was seen at local bars, playing the part of a broken man perfectly. My wife. He slurred one night at the Rusty Anchor. Loud enough for the Castellano surveillance team at the corner table to hear. Everything was a lie. Everything. The performance convinced crime family observers that he posed no threat. Reports filtered back to Sabrina and Glynn in Montreal, where Agent Sullivan's team tracked their movements and monitored their communications with the Castellanos. He's falling apart. Sabrina's voice came through on an intercepted call. Just like I said he would. Pathetic. Victor's apparent collapse was a masterpiece of deception. Even as he staged public meltdowns, he worked tirelessly with the FBI task force. Each drunken rant was followed by hours of strategic planning in the command center. The breakthrough came when Edward and Margaret, now clear-headed and determined, returned to the lake house. Under FBI supervision, they reached out to Stephen Fry, appearing to seek reconciliation. "Mr. Fry," Edward said during a recorded meeting, his voice heavy with fabricated defeat. "We've been thinking about what Sabrina said. Maybe it's time to simplify our estate." Fry, now working as an informant, passed the information up the chain. The Peterson parents, apparently broken by their son's decline, were ready to sign over everything. Victor's team crafted their lure with precision. They leaked information about a hidden Peterson family trust, supposedly untouched by the previous attempts at theft. The vintage Chris Craft boat, still waiting in the boathouse, would play a crucial role. The boat's restoration required importing rare parts from Europe, Victor explained to Sullivan as they reviewed the plan. "Perfect cover for moving money across borders." "And you're sure they'll bite?" Sullivan asked. Victor smiled grimly. "Sabrina always said that boat was my father's biggest waste of money. She won't be able to resist using it against us." As Christmas decorations began appearing along Crystal Lake shore, surveillance teams tracked Sabrina and Derek crossing back over the Canadian border. The Castellanos, convinced of their prey's vulnerability, authorized one final operation to seize the Peterson estate. Every phone call, every text message, every email flowed through FBI monitoring systems. From his command center in the study, Victor watched the pieces fall into place. Agent Sullivan stood beside him, both of them watching their targets move into position on multiple screens. "You realize this will determine more than just your family's fate," Sullivan said quietly. "If we can break the Castellanos' elder fraud operation, we save countless other families," Victor finished. "I know." Outside, snow began to fall on Crystal Lake. The vintage boat waited in its boathouse like a silent witness, ready to play its part in the coming storm. Victor Hale, the man Sabrina had dismissed as a lovesick fool, stood ready to spring the trap that would bring down an entire criminal empire. The final act was about to begin, and this time Victor Hale would be the one writing the ending. Heavy snow blanketed Crystal Lake on Christmas Eve, transforming the Peterson estate into a winter fortress. The security cameras, now fully operational but carefully disguised as malfunctioning, recorded every detail as a black SUV crept up the driveway at 11:47 p.m. inside the FBI command van parked half a mile away. Victor Hale watched Sabrina and Derek's approach on multiple monitors. "They really think you're passed out drunk in Portland," Agent Sullivan observed, adjusting her tactical vest. The FBI had orchestrated every detail, including Victor's very public breakdown at a Portland bar earlier that evening, actually performed by an undercover agent, while the real Victor prepared for the operation. "Sabrina always did underestimate me," Victor replied, his voice cold. "She thought I was just some lovesick fool she could manipulate." Through the surveillance feeds, they watched Derek approach the front door. His prison tattoos stood out starkly against the falling snow as he worked on the new lock, exactly the one the FBI had installed, knowing his preferred picking methods. Inside the lake house, Edward and Margaret sat at their kitchen table, appearing vulnerable but wired with state-of-the-art surveillance equipment. Edward, hands shook slightly as he arranged the financial documents, a performance for the cameras he knew were watching. "Remember," Victor's voice came through their hidden earpieces, "let them think they have the upper hand. The more comfortable they feel, the more they'll reveal." The front door swung open. Derek entered first, his boots tracking slush across the floor. Sabrina followed, dressed in an expensive designer coat that probably came from some other family's stolen fortune. Her stiletto boots clicked against the hardwood as she surveyed the room with predatory satisfaction. "You should thank us," Sabrina said, her smile cold as she regarded the elderly couple. Victor's drinking himself to death in Portland. We're here to protect your interests. She nodded to Derekin, who produced a thick stack of documents from his jacket. Margaret flinched convincingly at Derekin's approach, not entirely an act, given their last encounter. We didn't expect anyone tonight, she stammered. That's the point, isn't it? Sabrina laughed, helping herself to Edward, prized scotch without asking. The best gifts are always surprises. Consider this our Christmas present to you. We're going to help you clean up the mess your son made of everything. From the command van, Victor watched his former wife pour herself a drink like she owned the place. Agent Sullivan touched his arm lightly. She's getting comfortable. That's exactly what we want. The tactical teams were already in position. One group waited in the vintage Chris Craft boat, while others were concealed in the surrounding woods. Every room in the house had been wired for sound and video, creating an inescapable web of surveillance. Derekin prowled the room restlessly, his instincts clearly troubled by something he couldn't quite identify. We should do this quick, he muttered to Sabrina. Something doesn't feel right. Relax, Sabrina snapped, settling into Edward's favorite chair. Look at them, they're terrified. And Victor? She laughed again, the sound like breaking glass. He couldn't even figure out I was using illegal substance on his parents' coffee for months. Trust me, everything's under control. The next hour proved to be a masterclass in hubris. Sabrina, believing she faced only 2 defeated seniors, began to revel in her moment of triumph. The hidden cameras captured every word as she detailed her operation with smug satisfaction. You know what your real problem was? She asked, swirling the scotch in her glass. You were too trusting, too wrapped up in your precious family name and traditions. The Castellanos used to think small nursing home scams, insurance fraud. I showed them how to steal entire family legacies. Edward leaned forward, playing his role perfectly. How many others? Oh, dozens, Sabrina preened. The art galleries were brilliant, if I do say so myself. Who looks twice at $1 million painting changing hands? Money laundering at its finest. And the retirement homes? Perfect hunting grounds. Rich old people all lined up like dominoes. Derekin's unease grew as Sabrina talked. He kept glancing at the windows, the tactical training he'd corrupted now warning him something was off. But Sabrina was too caught up in her moment of glory to notice. Your son actually did me a favor, she continued, pulling out her phone. His pathetic drinking made this so much easier. I just need to call Judge Matthews about expediting these final transfers. Her eyes fell on the vintage boat's restoration paperwork, carefully placed on Edward's desk. The documentation suggested an insurance value 3 times the boat's actual worth, perfect for money laundering. As Sabrina reached for the papers, a familiar voice cut through the room. Federal agents insist on proper documentation, Victor said calmly, stepping out from the study doorway. Especially for international transactions, Derekin's reaction was instant and violent. He reached for his weapon, but FBI teams were already swarming in from every entrance. Victor's former military unit, now FBI tactical operators, had him surrounded before his hand could close on the grip. Agent Sullivan personally approached Sabrina, whose composure had finally shattered. Sofia Martinez, she announced formally, you are under arrest for fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and multiple counts of elder abuse. Across 3 states, synchronized raids began. Judge Matthews was taken into custody during his Christmas Eve dinner, the turkey still steaming on his dining room table. The Castellano family leadership found their holiday gathering interrupted by tactical teams. Retirement home administrators, corrupt bankers, and art gallery owners all received similar Christmas Eve surprises. In the lake house, Sabrina made one final attempt at control. You can't prove anything, she snarled at Victor. It's our word against 2 senile old people. Agent Sullivan smiled, producing a tablet displaying multiple video feeds. Actually, we have your entire confession from tonight, plus evidence from every property transfer, art sale, and retirement home scheme for the past 5 years. Mr. Fry was quite thorough in his documentation. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of recorded conversations and transactions, detailed financial records from phrase files, testimony from dozens of victims, international banking records, documented connections to organized crime, proof of judicial corruption, medical records showing systematic illegal substance of victims. Victor stepped closer to Sabrina as agents cuffed her. "You thought I was weak," he said quietly, "that I'd fall apart without you. But you never really knew me at all." "This isn't over," Sabrina spat, but her voice trembled. "Actually," Victor replied, "it is." The following Christmas transformed Crystal Lake into a symbol of justice and healing. The Peterson estate hosted a gathering of families, all victims of the Castellano organization who had reclaimed their stolen legacies. The vintage Chris Craft boat, fully restored, bobbed gently at its dock. Victor and Agent Sullivan, their relationship forged in the crucible of justice, announced their engagement during the gathering. Their connection had grown naturally from mutual respect and shared determination. Nothing like the manipulation that had characterized Victor's first marriage. Edward and Margaret, fully recovered from their ordeal, had established a foundation to protect elderly citizens from financial exploitation. The family's construction business thrived under Victor's leadership, now specializing in security systems for senior communities. In federal prison, Sabrina began serving her 30-year sentence. Her designer clothes exchanged for prison orange. Direcken's cooperation with authorities earned him 15 years in a separate facility. The Castellano organization's leadership faced life terms, while Judge Matthews wrote his memoirs from a minimum security compound. The Peterson family story became a catalyst for legal reform, leading to strengthened protections for elderly citizens and harsher penalties for inheritance fraud. The art galleries were transformed into legitimate businesses under new ownership, while the corrupted retirement homes found new, ethical management. Victor kept the recordings from that Christmas Eve, not out of vindictiveness, but as a reminder. The leather portfolio still sat in his father's study, now containing documentation of their victory rather than their victimization. The lake house stood proud against the Maine winter, its security cameras bright and functional, protecting a family that had turned victimization into victory. On quiet evenings, Victor and Benita Sullivan took the Chris Craft out on Crystal Lake, its restored engine purring across waters that had witnessed both betrayal and redemption. The boat, like the Peterson family, had emerged stronger from its trial by fire, a testament to the power of justice served cold on a winter's night. "What do you think about a spring wedding?" Benita asked one evening as they watched the sunset from the boat's deck. "Here by the lake?" Victor smiled, thinking of everything the waters had seen. "Perfect," he said. "This place has seen enough darkness. Time for some light." The vintage Chris Craft carried them back to shore, its wake spreading across Crystal Lake like ripples of justice. Steady, unstoppable, and finally complete. Epilogue 5 years later. The federal maximum security facility in Colorado stood stark against the mountain backdrop as Victor Hale walked through multiple security checkpoints. 5 years had transformed him. His military bearing remained, but success and vindication had added confidence to his stride. "Prisoner 24601 is ready," the guard announced. Sabrina Martinez, formerly known as Sophia Martinez and Sabrina Cross, sat shackled to the interview table. Prison had stripped away her designer facade. Her once immaculate hair was streaked with gray, her manicured hands now rough from mandatory labor. "Come to gloat?" she asked, but the old venom had drained from her voice. "No," Victor replied, setting down a thick folder. "I'm here because 3 more of your previous victims came forward. The FBI needs to verify some details." Sabrina's shoulders slumped. Her empire had crumbled completely in the years since her arrest. Each month seemed to bring new victims forward, each revelation extending her sentence. The 30-year term had grown to life without parole as evidence of more crimes emerged. "How's Directen?" she asked, attempting sarcasm. "Still enjoying his deal?" Marcus Green committed suicide in his cell last year. Victor informed her dispassionately. His conscience finally caught up with him. "Before he died, he provided evidence about 7 more families you targeted. Did you really think we wouldn't find them all eventually?" The news of Directen's death seemed to age Sabrina another decade in moments. Her last ally was gone. The Castellano organization had disowned her, Her illegal fortune was confiscated, and her web of lies had unraveled completely. Justice blooms. Back at Crystal Lake, the Peterson estate had become a symbol of resilience and redemption. The lakeside property now housed the Peterson Foundation for Elder Justice, a nationally recognized organization dedicated to preventing financial exploitation of seniors. Edward and Margaret Hale had transformed their trauma into purpose. Another group today. Victor asked his mother as he arrived home. Margaret, her silver hair now a crown of dignity, was arranging chairs in the converted boathouse conference room. Financial advisors from across New England, she confirmed. Your father's giving his presentation on spotting fraud indicators. 5 years later, and they still want to hear our story, the foundation had helped recover over $100 million in stolen assets for elderly victims nationwide. Edward Hale's experience had made him an expert at detecting financial exploitation schemes. His presentations to law enforcement and financial institutions had become legendary in the industry. The vintage Chris Craft boat, still gleaming at its dock, had become part of the foundation's logo, a symbol of preservation and justice. Victor and Benita Sullivan Peterson used it regularly, taking their 3-year-old twins Emma and James for sunset cruises. Ripples of change. The case's impact had rippled far beyond Maine. Judge Jeffrey Matthews, serving 20 years in minimum security, had become a cooperating witness in judicial corruption cases across the country. His detailed testimony had led to the removal of 12 corrupt judges and the overturning of hundreds of fraudulent property transfers. Stephen Fry, after serving 3 years and providing extensive cooperation, had been released and now worked as a consultant for the FBI's Elder Fraud Division. His insider knowledge proved invaluable in dismantling similar schemes nationwide. The corrupted retirement homes had been completely reformed under new management, with the Peterson Foundation providing oversight. The art galleries, once fronts for money laundering, now operated legitimately, with several hosting exhibitions of art created by fraud survivors as therapy. Detective Carla Voss had been promoted to lead a specialized elder fraud task force, often collaborating with the Peterson Foundation. James Rollins, Victor's former military teammate who received his initial SOS, had joined the Foundation's security division, training law enforcement in protective tactics for vulnerable seniors. A new chapter. Victor's construction company had evolved into Peterson Security Solutions, specializing in protecting senior communities and financial institutions. The technologies they developed had become industry standards, implemented in retirement facilities across the country. Benita Sullivan Peterson now headed the FBI's New England White-Collar Crime Division, her experience with the Peterson case informing her approach to complex fraud investigations. Their marriage had become a partnership in justice, their shared dedication to protecting others strengthening their bond. The twins, Emma and James, were growing up surrounded by the legacy of their family's triumph over betrayal. The lake house's security cameras still functioned perfectly, but they now watched over family gatherings and foundation events, rather than criminal conspiracies. The final ledger. During her years in prison, Sabrina had received multiple offers for book and movie deals about her crimes. She had accepted none, her silence a final punishment, as she watched the Peterson family's story of resilience inspire others through authorized documentaries and educational programs. The Castellano crime family had never recovered from the scandal. Their leadership died in prison, their criminal empire dismantled, their ill-gotten assets redistributed to victims. The investigation sparked by the Peterson case had led to the collapse of similar operations in 3 countries. The leather portfolio in Victor's study, once containing evidence of victimization, now held thank-you letters from families they had helped, photographs of reunited relatives, and documentation of lives rebuilt. The Foundation's annual Christmas gathering had become a celebration of healing, with hundreds of survivors sharing stories of recovery and renewal. Legacy of Crystal Lake. 10 years to the day after Sabrina's arrest, Victor stood at the lake's edge with his children. Emma, already showing her mother's investigative mind, asked about the story behind the boat's name. Justice Wake? Sometimes, Victor explained. Watching the sunset paint Crystal Lake in shades of victory, bad things happen to good people. But what matters is how we respond. This boat, this lake, this family. We chose to fight back. not just for ourselves, but for everyone who needed protection. The Peterson estate had become more than a home or foundation headquarters. It stood as a beacon of hope, proving that justice, while sometimes slow, was unstoppable when pursued with determination and integrity. Inside the house, Benita prepared for another foundation board meeting. Edward and Margaret played with their grandchildren in the restored boathouse. The security cameras blinked steadily, their red lights now symbols of protection rather than intrusion. Crystal Lake's waters lapped gently at the shore, carrying decades of stories of betrayal transformed into triumph, of victims becoming protectors, of a family that refused to be broken. The vintage Chris craft boat bobbed at its mooring, its wake long since settled but its impact eternally rippling outward, touching lives far beyond the shores of a lake in Maine. As dusk settled over Crystal Lake, Victor gathered his family for their evening boat ride. The tradition had begun as therapy but had become a celebration. Each voyage reminded them that while evil might make waves, justice created lasting currents that changed the very course of rivers. The Peterson legacy, forged in betrayal but tempered by justice, had become a foundation for others to build upon. In the end, Sabrina's attempt to destroy the family had instead created an indestructible force for good, proof that sometimes the greatest victories come from the battles we never chose to fight but refused to lose. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time.